Yeah, listener, it seems like I answer this question every month or so, but there's constantly flow of new traffic and new people, and I don't mind doing it. So technically, am I an ex-pro fighter? Yes, by the technical sense of the word, I am. By the skill sense of the word, I believe I am too. But let me explain how that is. So I am a lifelong martial artist. I started wrestling in the first, second grade, wrestled through high school. I've done karate from about age 11 until I was in my mid 20s. I boxed, I kickboxed. But you know, the climate today, which has been created by the popularity of the UFC, was not like it was before. There was no place for a young white kid to box in the suburbs before. Like, you're lucky if you got it in the inner city, and otherwise you can forget about it, right? But today, with the UFC raising all ships, I mean, everything's available to everyone. So I started full contact kickboxing when I finally found an instructor. And that's using the term lightly. He was a total fraud, but that's often what happens when something is not available. When it's scarce, someone will step in to fill that void, and they're not always totally ethical or real. But guess what? There wasn't a lot of real back then. It was a different time in the mid to late 90s for kickboxing and for fighting in general. So I was a karate guy, black belt, a regional champion, about to become national champion, thought really highly of myself. In fact, I was national champion as a red belt, which is really brown belt. And I found this quote unquote Muay Thai teacher who wasn't really Muay Thai at all. But I went to a class and I started kicking the Thai pads. So, this is awesome. Can you get me a fight? I was fighting a month later in Tijuana, Mexico in a leg kick bout, right, of kickboxing. I hurt the guy pretty badly, but at the same time, I didn't understand leg kicks. So when he starts kicking me low, I got hit and I got knocked down. I got up, they stopped the fight. And that was a professional fight in Mexico. Now I then crossed the border and I continued my full contact adventure into the amateur ranks, which back then was very common. I remember when Pedro Pitbull Fernandez fought Duke Rufus, or no, not Duke, Rick Rufus, in the first K1 in Vegas. One of the fighters made a big deal. He said, look, Pedro Fernandez isn't a pro fighter, he's an amateur fighter. But back then, the idea between amateur and pro was really blended in kickboxing. And it really had to do with the promoters, right? Promoting a pro fight cost a lot of money with the commission, relatively, not compared to today. And amateur didn't. So amateur promotions would masquerade as pro promotions. And there was no headgear, no shin guards, none of that. You went in there and you battled like you were a pro. So I had a career there as well, and I continued after that. I learned Muay Thai from Koban in New York and eventually trained with a bunch of MMA teams. And I found my stand-up was a lot better than them at the time, but many of them were grapplers. So that makes a lot of sense. But I'm not going to talk about that aspect of it. More to the point is the importance of what is a pro fighter and what's an amateur fighter. So I had that one pro fight in Mexico. I would say that my skill level is that of a pro fighter. In my opinion, I know many people. I mean, David Nielsen, the last guy who knocked me out as an amateur, I would say he was definitely pro level. Him and Joe Schilling had kind of a rivalry that never got settled in the ring. But this whole pro amateur thing is a line that was created because the sports weren't really functional. Even in MMA in the beginning, but everybody was pro, right? Eventually they kind of came up with some idea with what an amateur would be, no elbows, no knees, and now they've got a full amateur circuit, but they didn't for a really long time. So was I a pro fighter? I guess, yes, technically I was. Did I have a long, illustrious pro career? No, I did not. It was a different time, different place. You could not make money in fighting, even if I dedicated my whole life to it. Now, with the way things turned out, I kind of wish I had, right? Because I would have walked right into a school and I'd probably be one of those coaches like One Kick Nick or John Wood or something like that. But as it is, man, life takes us on bends and the journey's not the same for everybody. Read my book, Warrior of the Light. It'll explain it in depth.